we've been doing this as a 2-day short course in other places. We try to pack it into 45 minutes. We are also aware that people have different experiences and expertise in qualitative research, so please bear with us as we try and sort of pitch this at the level that resonates with most people. The other thing I'd like to say is that before we do qualitative research and trials, we do need qualitative training. As in, people can think that it's easy to do. It may not be rocket science, but it is a rigorous and systematic way of doing research. It requires, proper training before we undertake that in clinical trials. And there is a lot of short courses available in the country to do this qualitative research training. Okay, so moving on. What are we going to cover today? We'd like to start off with what is qualitative research for people who this might be sort of known to, but also what is not qualitative research. How we add value to clinical trials, and then draw on some case studies from the UK and from India. So starting off with what is not qualitative research, people who are new to qualitative research often sort of get confused with patient and public involvement in engagement works called PPIE with qualitative research. They have very different purposes. PPIE aims to help you select and refine a research question that's relevant to those who are going to benefit from it. And the patients and the public are very much part of the research team. It's an informal process, often not requiring ethical approval. Qualitative research, on the other hand, aims to answer a specific research question through a specific method. And the participants often provide data, and the data is formally analyzed, following very stringent regulatory standards and guidelines, and you do need ethical approval for this. The other thing that people often get confused possibly is quality of life studies. The fact that it has quality that can be confusing.
Recording in progress.
Similar quality improvement studies as well is something that people can think is qualitative just to say that they are not. Other than the qual, there is nothing else between them that's common. So what then is qualitative research? Qualitative research is an empirical approach to understand events, actions, behaviors, values, and the key thing there is that it is from the perspective of the informed. It is a systematic and rigorous approach, like I said, that follows established principles and guidelines and processes. I'm just going to put up a few pictures here. Just give you a couple of seconds to sort of take that in. I think it is possibly fairly clear where this is headed. And this is to say that what we perceive as the truth depends on the vantage point you are at, depends on where you are standing. And why is this important from a clinical trial perspective? I suppose it is to get across the notion that the way a trialist would see the trial processes, the information provision, would be very different to how the participants see. They might be viewing that very differently in terms of the information provision. If a trialist thinks somebody isn't participating in the trial because they just didn't understand it or they didn't know it, from the participant perspective, it might be that the information provision wasn't good enough. That is why it's really important to remember that what we think of as a given fact actually depends on where you're looking at it from. Qualitative research is concerned with the meanings that people attach to their experiences. So it is all about meaning making, essentially, of the social world that we live in, how we make sense of the world. And again, if you are a qualitative researcher, this will be very familiar, but for those who aren't, this is still new to, it is a good starting point to look at qualitative research in comparison to quantitative research, something that people tend to be more familiar. I suppose in quantitative research, what you're looking at is the breadth of the work. You really want a large number of participants, so it's usually large scale and often a representative sample. It is usually a random sample with a fixed sample size. Qualitative research, on the other hand, you're looking for depth. So you're looking at a smaller number of participants, but you're looking at in-depth information from each participant. It is often small scale and what we mean by that is that the people you approach to take part in your qualitative research are purposely sampled because they will be information rich rather than be a random sample. And your sample size, yes, we usually give an approximation, but it could be dependent on the point at which particular teams are being identified. Information is another concept that we use to determine sample size. It is this notion that the more information rich your sample is, the fewer participants you might be. And I would say in practice, we end up using a bit of both. The data in your quantitative is numeric, in qualitative is written or spoken language. The reasoning or the reasoning process used in quantitative research can be deductive. It is top-down in some ways, it is hypothesis or theory testing, and it is often linear. You do all your data collection and then you do your data analysis. In qualitative research, it tends to be inductive, it tends to be exploratory and theory generating often, and it is bottom-up. It is very much grounded in the data that you're collecting, and it is iterative. So it is not a linear process. So often in qualitative research, what we do is say we said we're going to conduct about 30 interviews. After the first 5 or 6 interviews, we stop. We do some preliminary analysis, and the findings that we identify from there sort of helps us decide what our next sample should be. Who do we next approach? Would we like a woman's perspective on this? Would we want the younger member of the population? Would we like more views from there? So that really determines where we go. And I should make a note that this is a very black and white way of looking quantitative and qualitative. There are some overlaps. There can be sometimes qualitative research that's deductive as well. But for initial learning purposes, it helps to look at it this way. The primary methods are CPs, experiment surveys, and quantitative and qualitative includes focus groups, observations, documentary analysis, primarily statistical analysis and quantitative, and thematic analysis is one of the common ones to use, though there are many more. Again, when we do a qualitative course, that's something that's discussed in detail. The researcher's role in quantitative research is seen as separate. Quantitative research is very much seen as part of the process. The research is pretty much the two used in the qualitative research, and we do often hear of the word reflexivity, which means to take into account your own social background, your academic background, and the impact that it has on the entire process and the findings. I won't get into paradigms here, but just to sort of say the quantitative research draws from a positivist paradigm usually, where there is this belief that there is a single truth out there, you follow certain number of steps and you can achieve, arrive at that truth or, the phenomenon that you're trying to look at. In qualitative research, it sort of moves from there towards saying, well, some people believe, there's a school of thought that is there a single truth, maybe there are multiple truths, along the continuum of maybe there's a single truth, but no matter how hard you're trying, you're only going to be able to get one particular version of it. So again, when you get into qualitative research, these are things that you want to do more, but in a bit more detail. And the type of question differs. So the idea of putting forward quality research is not to say that one is better than the other. It is simply that you choose your research methods based on the kind of question you're looking to answer. So if you have a why or a how question, you do qualitative research. If it's a what or a how many question, etc., you do quantitative project. So with that sort of very brief touching upon what qualitative research is, if we think about how and when can qualitative research be of value in clinical trials, you can use it in combination with quantitative research, including clinical trials, and it can be used at various time points. You could do it prior to quantitative research, you could do it during quantitative research, as well as following quantitative research. And that very much depends on what is the research question you're trying to address. So if we think of some examples, usually we have a whole range of examples, and I just put a few key ones in relation to some of the work that we can think of as examples. Looking at prior to clinical trials. Now, this is a really key paper that is easy to find. It's called the Briston study, which was led by a member of our team, Professor Endorsement, who led the qualitative aspect of this study. So the trial was about to be put forward based on the funder's requirement that we need to compare 3 different types of dressings for wounds. So you need to compare simple dressing versus complex dressing versus no dressing. And the trial has just gone forward like that. We don't know whether it would have actually achieved its outcomes, because what the qualitative research showed is that when they were interviewing professionals as well as patients, it became very clear that complex dressing isn't something that was used at all. In fact, glue, which was meant to be a wound closure product, was also being used as a wound dressing. So the very treatment arms that they were thinking about changed because of the qualitative research. And that then, would go on to inform the main trial when that comes about. This is again another example of work that was done prior to clinical trials, and this is from a study that was done in India, a yoga program for type 2 diabetes prevention. They did a qualitative study to explore the feasibility of the trial in India, looking at the facilitators and challenges in conducting the study. They did a number of interviews, and they sort of, I won't get into the details of the findings, but what they concluded with was that they identified trial and intervention-related barriers and facilitators, which will then go on to inform the main RC. So that's the key bit. The applied component of it actually going on to inform the main RC. You could also go beyond clinical trials, and Dr. Nicola will present an example of how we did this work. This is another trial that I was involved in called the Paramasivan study. It was a trial comparing 3 different surgical procedures for complex obesity. And what we did was to conduct a two-tool intervention, which is qualitative research embedded within the trial to identify recruitment and inform patient problems and address this. So we were able to do that throughout the life course of the study, the staff interviews, all the recordings of trial discussions, non-participant observations, and also looking at the quantitative data, explaining log data. All of this meant that we could identify the recruitment problems and provide suggestions to how to address that. That meant that the trial moved from the pilot to the main phase. You could also do following clinical trials. For example, if you end up with a clinical trial that the findings are not particularly make sense, or there's something you want to explore in a little bit more detail, you could then do qualitative research following clinical trials. Now, this is a trial, this is an example of a study, qualitative study that was done following a proper intervention trial in rural India. At the end of the trial, we realized that the intervention of it was very poor. The trial finished, so there's a lot of money obviously invested in the trial, I suppose, and then they were trying to understand how could this be prevented, or what were the reasons there was poor intervention of it, because this trial was the intervention was aiming to provide safer, cleaner drinking water to the rural population, and it involved treated water. And what the quantitative research showed was that people had busy lives, working busy, going for convenience rather than what the trial thought was safe. So they preferred the river, or they didn't like the taste. There were a number of issues that meant they didn't want this intervention that the trial team wanted to have within the trial. So that is a brief run through of what qualitative research is and how it can be incorporated into a trial. I'm going to hand over to Nicola.
So I'll just talk you through a case study of how we've embedded qualitative research through the starter aspect. So this was a trial. It was a 2-arm trial. It was comparing sertraline, which is an antidepressant, versus placebo for reducing anxiety in adults with autism. The key best data was derived by, we finished the study, just getting the results out at the moment. It had 4 UK centres and 1 centre in Australia. So when we were having discussions about starting the trial, we had a lot of concerns about whether this was going to be feasible, whether we'd be able to recruit to target. We know this is an underserved population. We know this is a population that lacks trust in healthcare, in healthcare professionals, in research in general. And they also, it's a population that tends to have an intolerance to uncertainty. Now, this is a kind of problem because RCTs kind of have randomization at the heart of them. That's all about uncertainty, about what treatment you're going to get allocated. It may also be a blinded trial, so you don't know what treatment you're taking for a potentially long period of time, and that was started. So we were quite worried about whether or not we could recruit to target. So we embedded a program of qualitative research throughout the entire life course of starter. And we wanted to understand what recruitment barriers might be, and we wanted to try and help trial conduct so we could successfully recruit. So this was our program of quantitative research.
we did some work before the trial was actually designed and before it was implemented. This was called the Apricot study. So we interviewed autistic adults and we asked them what they thought about RCTs. What do they understand by RCTs? What do they think about randomisation, about placebos, about blinding? And we used strata as a hypothetical example to get them to think through an RCT. We then did some during trial qualitative research, and we embedded an intervention called the Qualitative recruitment intervention, and I'll tell you more about that in a minute. It may not mean too much to you at the moment. And this is an intervention to try and identify what the recruitment issues might be, but then to do something about them in real time whilst the recruitment is actually underway. We also embedded some qualitative research during and after the trial, so we talked to those that had taken part in the trial, and we asked them what was their experience of taking part, what their experience of taking medication, and we're also in the process of doing some RCT guidance, so after the trial, we're doing a systematic review and we're interviewing RCT researchers, so we can offer some guidance to people who are doing future trials with autistic populations or other populations with neurodivergent, other trials with neurodivergent populations. I'm just going to focus on the Apricot study and the QRI, which is going to go straight. As with any research study, there's no one individual. I'm here presenting this today, but we're a team of very smiley, lovely people. We have a team of qualitative researchers, methodologists, clinicians, a particular reference to or particular point out to Albert there on the left who undertook a lot of the research. So I'm just taking through the qualitative research before the trial. So this is before we finalised the design of the startup. We knew we wanted to do such a trial, but we didn't really fine-tune the design issues. So we interviewed 49 people with autism, and talked to them about RCTs and using strata as a hypothetical trial. And we found people were quite motivated to take part. They actually quite liked the idea of taking part in an RCT. They understood an RCT fairly well. They felt, because they had autism, because they were autistic, they felt they had a moral obligation to take part. They wanted to advance autism research. They wanted to help other people. They wanted to help with the comorbidity that they were experiencing. And they wanted to inform change the society. They wanted to make society more accepting of the difficulties that they themselves were experiencing as well as their fellow autistic population. So clearly motivated to take part in the trial. But they did have some concerns about trial participation. There was a lot of distrust around healthcare, around research, were they aiming to cure autism? There have been a lot of ongoing health inequities that eroded that trust. So that was still evident with the people that we talked to. They were also expecting some communication barriers. Were they going to be able to explain their reactions to medication? Were the healthcare professionals going to understand this? Was there going to be some misunderstanding? And they were also concerned about introducing more uncertainty. Taking a pill every day for, in this case, it's actually up to a year. That change in routine, this was going to cause some anxiety. So these concerns, they actually have the potential to become barriers to participation unless we did something about them. So we set about doing something about them. We implemented these learnings. We used them to help with the final design of strata and the conduct of it. And we focused on 3 key areas that came out of that research, which was in increasing the trust, improving communication, and reducing uncertainty. So we did a lot of different things. This is just a flavour of some of the things we did. We really focused on that person-centred communication. We were very transparent about what we were doing, very transparent about who was funding this research and why. We had a lot of inbuilt flexibility about how they might want to engage with the trial and complete questionnaires. We chose appropriate measures that were validated for the target population. Apologies. We developed safety protocols about medication, about withdrawal side effects, things that people were concerned about. And we trained researchers. We trained them so they were good communicators with the autistic population. So that was before the trial, that helped with the design. And then we set up strata and we embedded some qualitative research during the trial. We embedded something called the Qualitative recruitment intervention. So this is an intervention that we've developed at Bristol within our team. Okay. Perfect. Within our team, and this is an intervention to help trialists recruit challenging RCTs. So the aim of it is to really try to understand what are the core recruitment barriers, what's causing the problems, what is the bottleneck, and what can we do about that? And we want to be able to optimise recruitment and informed consent. That's our ultimate aim. And we want to be able to do this whilst the trial is underway, whilst it's actually recruiting, so to do it in real time. We've got a protocol paper there, we've got a paper on our methods. And ultimately, we want to make sure that all eligible patients, they actually have that chance to make an informed decision about whether or not they want to take part. This is an intervention that we've developed and delivered in roughly about 80 trials so far over the 20 years. So it's not just a one-off the starter trial. And the intervention's got two phases. First of which is understanding where are the challenges, where's the issues. And we try to do this as rapidly as we can within the recruitment period. And we use an array of different qualitative methods. We talk to sites, we understand and map their recruitment pathways. How are patients being screened right through to how are they then being randomised? What's happening where? Where are we using the most patients? We look at their screening logs as well. We compare those within and across sites. We audio record those recruitment study discussions. So those core discussions where the study is discussed, treatment is discussed, and patients considering consent. We also interview trial staff, we interview patients, what's their views on the study, what's happening on the ground, tell us your experiences. We'll analyse patient-facing documents, we'll analyse protocols, and we'll also observe investigative research. So we do a whole host of primarily qualitative research. It's like being a detective, and we try to do that as rapidly as we can. We then triangulate these findings, we discuss them with the trial management group, and together we agree a plan of action about what we can do. And we design and we deliver various strategies to try and optimise recruitment. What we do depends very much on what we find in phase one, but we usually do some form of feedback, one-to-one feedback with recruiters or with sites or with the study as a whole, some kind of training, some kind of written guidance. Maybe documents on conveying ethics, maybe some cue cards that we do. We might want to change the trial documents. If some of the documents are leading perhaps towards one of the treatments, we might want to redress that balance. We might want to adjust the trial pathways and processes to make it more streamlined. So in Strata, we had a lot of data. We had 16 interviews with staff, 62 with patients. We had a lot of screening log data. We had a lot of audio recordings, 233. That's pretty large for the trials that we do. We reviewed the study documents in collaboration with our autistic advisory group, our PPIE group, and we attended as many meetings as we could. We identified some enablers of trial recruitment. We really got clinicians and researchers on board. They really bought into the study. They could see all the work we've done in the pre-trial. They could see that we properly designed it, it was properly powered. That really got their confidence in their trial study. So they bought into the study. This time happened post-COVID. So the ideas we had, everything had to be done remotely, online. This actually turned to work into our favour. Those that were delivering the trial found that very effective. Participants themselves actually really liked the remoteness and being able to do everything online. It worked. COVID did us a favour. The highly trained recruiters as well, that worked really well. They were a really good enabler of recruitment. But we also identified some barriers. We could see that there were differences across sites. There were differences with R&D governance. In some sites, only the clinicians could screen the patients. In others, it was the research staff. The clinical workload was an issue, particularly if the clinicians were screening the patients. Some sites couldn't take their own encouraging staff referrals for people to sign up for the study, but some of the staff, some of the trusts couldn't take those staff referrals in. They didn't have a mechanism to make that happen. And we also identified there were many potential participants that were already taking surgery.
So we set about doing something about this in real time, and we worked very closely with all the sites. We had lots of meetings with the sites. We shared what we've learned from other sites. We identified their issues. We worked together an action plan. We went back. We revisited that. We kept in contact. We had lots of layered support systems going on throughout the whole process. And anything that was working really well, like the audio recordings, we shared, we discussed. We worked together collaboratively along with our autistic advisory group, and we reached out as far as we could. We also looked at our website, how could we improve it, our expression of interest form, we had issues with that. We did as much as we could. This was our recruitment graph, which we're very proud of. So the blue line is the target. This was revised very early on because of our delays with COVID. And our orangey red line is our actual recruitment. So we were on target, very slight dip, and then smashed it. We over-recruited early, which for this trial was pretty phenomenal. Not only did we recruit, but we retained the patients as well, which is really important. 92% completed the primary outcome at 4 months. We also had a secondary outcome at 52 weeks, so at a year we had, I think it was 87% retainment rate, which for this population, for this trial, is phenomenal. And the findings are being submitted for publication at the moment. It is currently the largest medication trial to treat mental health problems for autistic adults in the world. We like to think the work we did, the qualitative work that we threaded throughout that entire life course, was worth it. We built trust in the study. Participants could see that trust. They brought into the study, and not only that, they retained. And we got the result. So I think that's, oh yeah, that's the Thank you. Thank you. Nikki, there's a bit more. In case you don't do that. We also try to think about how we can do this work in India. So, the QRI that Nikki was talking about, we adapted that, or we are in the process of adapting that to India and to the Orion Eye feasibility study. So we did this feasibility study at the King Edward Memorial Hospital in Mumbai with the Department of Clinical Pharmacology. Many of you may be aware of Professor Nicola, who was the lead for this, and Professor Rhoda as well had a role in the early stages, and the team is right below, so everybody was involved in making sure this study worked the way, or went ahead the way we meant for it to be. We got the funding in 2020 from the MRC NIHR Trials Methodology Research Partnership. They had a global health compounding call. It was a small amount of money, and that because of the COVID hit, it took a while to get started. We sort of did the study about 2023-2024. We're just in the process of writing it up, and hopefully we will get this government done soon. So, the work that Nikki was talking about in terms of the QRI, we primarily applied it in the UK. We've also applied it in the US and some of the European countries. In the US by the QRI lead, QRI founder, Professor Jenny Denman, as well as in some of the other European countries. We've not yet applied it in the lower and Midland countries. So just to say, it's not really something is applied, if something has worked elsewhere, that it would work in our countries as well, or that we should immediately transfer it. It's really important to see whether there is a need for that work and explore what else has been done. So we started off by looking at what empirical research has been undertaken on the ethics of clinical research in India. So we did the systematic scoping review by 2019, 2020, published in 2021. We also did some consultation work with the people in the acknowledgements, so that it was well informed by the challenges that people were facing on the